So crushed and charred were the remains of the vehicles involved in the crash, the true horror of the collision took time to unfold. But now it's known that 2 adults and 2 children, thought to be from the one family, perished in their family station wagon, along with the driver of a northbound van. When Kempsey Fire Brigade arrived at the scene, both vehicles were blazing. There was no chance for escape.
Both vehicles heavily involved in fire. We had the fire under control within about 2 minutes of our arrival, but there was still a lot of heat and smoke, and it was probably several minutes after before we could get in to see the full impact of the accident.
For local rescue services and police, the accident is a grim reminder of Australia's worst ever bus crash, which happened just a few kilometres further north. Police investigations into today's accident are only now beginning, but there is speculation at the scene that the Magna station wagon containing the family was turning into a property, thought to be the home of relatives, when it was clipped from behind by a third vehicle. The Magna then collided with a northbound Nissan van, both vehicles bursting into flame. The lanes of the Pacific Highway are expected to be closed for some time as scientific police endeavour to unravel the cause of the tragedy. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
The miners went out last weekend and rallied in Canberra on Tuesday. They are not due to return to work until midnight tomorrow in their campaign for government intervention in the international price-setting process. A bank up of 17 vessels is anchored off Newcastle, with another 3 tied up in the port waiting for cargoes. Fresh coal stocks will not begin arriving until Saturday, with loading to begin Sunday at the earliest, and the process not settling down to a normal pace for at least a week. Meanwhile, the union says meetings this afternoon with Prime Minister Keating, next week with other government ministers, and the combined meeting with Resources Minister Bedall later this month are a significant achievement.
Not just a forum for a talk feast, but to establish the principles for the future, where the unions can be involved along with the government and the negotiators in these negotiations.
The United Mineworkers Federation is gearing up for a period of intense lobbying on the price-setting issue and will be asking for a moratorium on job losses in the meanwhile.
We don't take unilateral strike action easy, but if we're forced into a corner, which we've done with this case, our destiny's in our own hands, and that's why we took the action we did.
The union also claims that some of the smaller operators in the coal industry privately support their stand on the issue of price setting, while the big operators, like BHP, are prepared to give in to the Japanese buyers to maintain their market shares.
Latest figures show that in cities there are around 700 patients to every doctor. In the country, that figure rises to 1,200, in isolated areas as high as 2,000. Recognising the seriousness of the problem, the federal government has provided millions of dollars to entice medical students to work in rural areas after they graduate.
A rural practice is interesting, rewarding. It's easier financially than it is in cities. And rather than struggling to make a living in the central Sydney or the North Shore or somewhere like that, many people would do well to consider going to the country.
Professor Sandy Reid heads a rural health club involving undergraduates at Newcastle University.
The club will enable students of like mind to talk to each other and share ideas about going to the country and share some enthusiasm.
Through support and networking, the group hopes to tackle some of the problems in rural areas, such as limited resources and isolation, and eventually balance the numbers of GPs and specialists.
There's gross overcrowding in the cities, and so I think a redistribution would be very helpful.
An impressive march. An impressive march marked the graduation of the men from recruits to the rank of private in the regular army. The The graduating Tobruk platoon is named after one of Australia's best-known war heroes, the Rats of Tobruk. The Rats, as they are fondly known, have forged a strong relationship with the Singleton Army base.
It's important though for the soldiers to have someone like the association, the members of the association, to look up to.
Today's event was the culmination of 11 weeks of gruelling training for the soldiers. In that short time, they undertook a crack course in weapons training, physical endurance, first aid, navigation and communications. 3 failed to pass the test due to injury. The Rats know all too well the hardships faced by soldiers and rewarded those who graduated.
It's lovely to keep a connection with the boys. We do what we can for them. They used to write essays on Tobruk and all this sort of thing. And today we intend presenting them with a map of the siege of Tobruk with the history of it and one of the association plaques.
The 50 soldiers will now be posted to battalions in Townsville and Sydney. If their marching is anything to go by, one keen observer thinks they'll do very well.
The marching today is terrific insofar that a lot of the manoeuvres here today that you would not have done in our time.
Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
In near-perfect conditions, spectators at Hamilton Bowling Club were treated to an entertaining match. 128 teams from throughout the state had entered the tournament. Today's final was a showdown between 4 of Newcastle's best. In the black shirts, Charlestown's Ian Barrett and Terry Webster from Hamilton paired up against Cohiba's Greg Sattler and John Clark from Charlestown. Webster and Barrett established their mark early, winning the first end, only to see the lead seesaw in the ends to follow. At the 7th of the 21 ends played, Precision Bowling saw Terry Webster level the score 5-all. On the next end, Greg Sattler rolled in a pearler, making John Clark a happy man. Unfazed, Ian Barrett displayed impeccable placement, this setting the stage for Barrett and Webster to wrap up the game 22-16. Catherine Lamond, NBN News. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
A flamboyant parade set the scene for the Back to Harrington event. 38 floats, bands and local groups took part as it wound its way down the town's main street. After nearly a year in the planning, the turnout and success of the event surpassed the organisers' wildest dreams.
Last night we had the official opening, and in our small hall we had 300 people turn up to view our historical display and to attend the opening, and today the parade has just been a wonderful success.
The initial idea came from the Manning North Evening View Club to mark the 100-year anniversary since work began on Harrington's seawall. The breakwater is one of the main attractions of the town, popular with fishers and walkers. Thousands are expected to turn out again tomorrow as the festivities continue. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
Coffs United was on the attack throughout the match and stung Lansdowne with 2 goals, both scored by Brett Adams. Lansdowne burst back with an angry attack, but Coffs held their ground. In a feverish assault on the goals, the keeper was mistaken for the ball. Players from both teams were sin-binned in the second half, but Coffs managed to maintain the 2-0 lead throughout the game. In the A-grade consolation game, the Maclean Valley Rangers defeated Camden Haven 0-1, and Port Legends beat Lismore. The Sawtell B-grade side went down to Pacific Palms, and in the ladies' A side, Sydney's Loftus United defeated the Port United Green team. Bourbon Street, look out! Beaumont Street is fast becoming the place for the chic. The annual celebration of art and jazz is putting the Newcastle suburban street on the map for jazz fans from along the east coast. If variety is the spice of life, then more than 20,000 revellers had their fill with a mix of musical flavours and the choice of pavement picnics or outdoor cafes. The cosmopolitan Beaumont Street bore the brunt of the 1989 earthquake, but since then has put on a brave face for the increasing large crowd which flocks to the festival each year.
With the trial of free parking still underway in the CBD, the City Centre Committee believes more can be done to lure customers back. For 20 years, shops in the mall have been open for Thursday night trading. However, that will change if retailers support the move to Friday nights.
We'll make Newcastle the only place available for trading on a Friday night, and that means we'll be open for business when our competitors are closed. That'll bring a lot more people here.
In addition, the City Centre Committee hopes most retailers will open their doors on Sundays. It claims 16% of potential business is being lost to suburban shopping centres, taking advantage of weekend trading. With figures showing a continual decline in the mall's retail sales over the last 30 years, the City Centre Committee hopes Friday night and Sunday trading will make a difference, an opinion shared by some shoppers.
On Thursday, you've still got to go to work the next day, where Friday, if you were out a bit later shopping, well, then you've got Saturday to recover, haven't you?
It's a bit easier on the weekend, you know, with the family and things like that. It makes it a little easier to come in on a Sunday rather than have to come in rush during the week.
Oh, yes, I think so. Sunday, as long as the money lasts out.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Catherine Young is becoming known as the Bird Woman. She runs a business called Eternal Love Doves from her Hamilton home. The birds are white fan-tailed pigeons bred especially for the wedding industry. Are you prepared for the title of the Bird Lady?
Well, not really, but I'm afraid that's the title that I've obtained.
With the business now, what sort of market are you finding? What sort of people want doves at the wedding?
Mainly, well, all types of people. A lot of outdoor weddings we're having, a lot of garden weddings, church weddings as well.
At any time, Catherine will have a dozen birds around the house. Courtship birds are used during wedding ceremonies and are often carried by flower girls and page boys. Another 30 birds can be set free from baskets during the ceremony. For romantics, the birds have special significance.
It's the meaning behind the doves as well, the eternal love, happiness, the peace, fertility. They're mated pairs and they stay together for life, so they rear their young up together. The male look after the babies during the daytime and the females of the night time.
Catherine says there's increasing interest in the business. Andrew Lobb, NBN News. Nobody expected such a casualty list from a peacetime mission. 3 men dead, 15 injured, 10 of them seriously.
It was a very, very bad day, a day that I often wake up at the middle of the night and think of it.
Alf Finney was at the head of a flotilla of amphibious vehicles, light tanks and army ducks, similar to these seen during a later exercise. The convoy was headed from Newcastle to Broughton Island off Port Stephens, but was hit by bad weather in Stockton Bight.
I was looking for an axe to cut the tow line, which we had an LVT, that's an amphibious vehicle, in tow. The reason being that I thought that if the tank went down, it was in deep water, that it could have pulled us down. But as I tried to get an axe, we sank ourselves with these enormous big waves coming over us.
It was smooth sailing early in the voyage. The commander's young son was on board for the ride. 8 vehicles sank, 100 men were tossed into the sea, 3 drowned. Survivors struggled to shore.
All I know that I seen young Peter James, who was 11-year-old, the commanding officer's young child, which was the unit mascot. He was floundering in the water, so I yelled out. I didn't know if Jack James, the commanding officer, heard me, but I yelled out that I've got a Peter. After a fair while and getting very, very tired and cold and frightened of the sharks, we got to the beach.
It was the first time since 1954 that many of the veterans of the 15th Northern River Lancers and the 16 Company of the Royal Australian Army Service Corps had been together. They spent the day remembering the sad and the good times at their Newcastle base.
The contestants, aged from 3 years to adults, came from the Hunter, as well as the Central Coast, New England, Sydney and the Mid-North Coast. This year's quest was the largest to be held, featuring both fashion parades and dance performances. The judging panel included Peter Chadwick, manager of Sydney's top model agency, Chadwicks. 16-year-old Katrina Hill from Adamstown and 22-year-old Richard Henwood from Sydney won the 16 years and over section. A high standard of entrance made for a glamorous evening. All proceeds from the quest will go to the Royal New South Wales Institute for Deaf and Blind Children's Tingira Centre.
Hundreds of the club faithful came to the Western Suburbs League Club to meet the night squad for 1994. As expected, there were plenty of fresh faces in the reserves and under-21s, but surprisingly there was nearly just as many in first grade. David Waite called it the least experienced team in the competition, with at least 8 members playing their first full season in their allocated positions. Robbie O'Davis is one regular in the Knights backline for the opening game against the red-hot Rabbitohs, but new buys Russell Wire and Nathan Barnes are fresh faces. Andrew Johns will join his brother Matthew in the halves. The pack remains virtually the same. The launch welcomed the new guns to the club, but also paid homage to the original 5-graded players who've made it to season number 7. Reserves captain Stephen Crowe, joined by Paul Michael, Mark Glanville, Paul Harrigan and Robbie McCormack. Although the team is expected to do well on the paddock, there'll be a knockout off it, with the launch of a new clothing line. The players strutting their stuff, much to the amusement of the Knights fans. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. Seven months ago, Errol Moore announced a grand plan to create an industrial estate on this 240-hectare site. It was to be 3 times as large as the Cardiff Industrial Estate, with many businesses already showing interest in the development, ideally situated near the new section of the F3. Maitland Council's approval appeared certain, with the land already zoned industrial. But the developer's own development control plan called for the western section of the site to remain unchanged, with industrial blocks only to be established on the eastern side. This was approved by Council last night, rezoning the western side as open space.
The outcome proves that development doesn't have to be controversial. It can marry together the needs and wishes and aspirations of the entire community.
Cessnock residents relished the opportunity of seeing National Basketball League sides playing on home boards. Derek Rucker starred for the Falcons, anchoring as the team's playmaker throughout the game. In the first quarter, Townsville kept the scoreboard ticking over and the turnovers flowing. Coach Tom Wiseman wasn't impressed. The Falcons picked up their game, turning solid defence into attack. This part of Paul Kuiper's 10 points for the match. The Falcons led 24-23 in the first quarter and 48-46 at half-time. They extended this lead in the third session. Again, Derek Rucker was in everything. Martin McLean making pay dirt of the Americans' tenacity. Townsville stepped up the pressure in the final quarter, but the Falcons answered the challenge, the Rucker-Jensen combination featuring on several occasions. Newcastle eventually wrapped up the match 102-93. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Megan Cridland and Linda Jubbs were at Umina High School today preaching about their newfound passion.
That is kill whales for scientific purposes, which we don't think is necessary in this day and age.
4 weeks ago, life was different for this Empire Bay pair. After watching the NBN documentary The Last Whale, they changed from mild-mannered housewives to super crusaders.
And we were rather shocked and appalled at what we saw happen on the film. Well, we want the other countries to know how we feel about it.
They have managed to inspire the entire Central Coast and beyond. Letters and signed petitions have flooded in from across Australia. They plan to present the whale-sized pile of paper protests to the International Whaling Commission when it meets in Mexico in May for its annual general meeting. Some of the most touching letters came from local school students.
People don't have the right to kill an animal, let alone wipe out a whole species, and it'll wreck the entire ecosystem and it'll gradually turn on us.
A sorrow deep down within, too deep to touch my pool of water, too deep to touch a cruel slaughter.
Weighing more than 10 tonnes, it broke free of the truck when a chain holding the load snapped. The cog half slammed into a telegraph pole and continued skidding along the pavement before coming to rest outside Tighes Hill, TAFE. Luckily, no one was injured in the accident. The only damage was done to the hapless telegraph pole and concrete pavement.
A RAF helicopter overhead provided symbolic encouragement for Williamtown's favourite son, Dave Collins, as the entrance made a mad dash to the first buoy. The 1 kilometre swim was followed by a 30-kilometre ride and then a 10-kilometre run. Wagga Navy instructor Ken Steinman emerged first, followed by Williamtown civilian employee Dave Collins, with a pack of swimmers close behind. Louise McNulty was the first female into the bike leg, but most interest centred on the two-way tussle for first. Steinman and Collins fought the whole way, the visitor only about a bike length in front at the end of the leg. Steinman had a 20-metre lead over Collins going into the run, with renowned runner Scott Weavers making up 12 places to be third. There was a new women's leader, with Medford entrant Judith Island taking control. Up front, the men's lead had also changed, with Collins getting a 40-metre break on Steinman. But Collins proved too strong in 1 hour, 36 minutes and 16 seconds. 19 seconds in front of Steinman, Weavers was a further half a minute behind.
It's hard just keeping in front of Ken, and I knew Scott was behind me and he runs like a hare. So it was just try and work as hard as I could to keep in front of them.
15 minutes later and Judith Island led home the women's brigade. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. The new building is a stark contrast to its predecessor. New, efficient and ideally located at the main entrance to town off the F3. Cessnock's political and business leaders gathered for the launch of this touch-button advancement in Cessnock's future. The centre will employ 5 people, but its work will help many more, with 2,500 people dependent on the local tourism industry, which generates $85 million a year. A cut and a snip of the live curtain by member for Hunter Eric Fitzgibbon, and a plaque was unveiled and the centre officially opened. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. A cold Newcastle day was warmed at the Radisson Hotel with plates full of traditional Irish stew and the renowned Gaelic spirit. Murphy's, O'Shea's and Gallagher's filled the room to celebrate anything Irish.
Oh, it means a day off and have a few beers and meet some friends and celebrate the Patron Saint of Ireland.
An Irish flavour was added to St Teresa's Primary School's tuck shop. The new Lambton students were allowed to dress for the occasion, any colour as long as it was green. Pin the Tail on the Donkey was replaced by Find the Pot of Gold. The blindfolded little leprechauns were cheered on by their friends as they tried to find their role model and his overflowing bag of riches. Thanks. I had less of the Irish luck in finding the pot of gold, but I did find a pint of Guinness, and after all, it's being happy not rich that St Patrick's Day is all about.
On the banks of the Williams River, a battle is brewing. At the centre of controversy, the river's ecological future and those threatening it. Plagued by blue-green algal attacks since the Siem Weir was sealed 16 years ago, the river's future has become a major concern to government agencies, farmers, environmentalists and recreational users. Property owner Peter Thompson says the damage caused by wave flow from speedboats has become so bad he's been forced to take matters into his own hands. He's placed buoys in the river to deter skiers from coming close to the bank and begun his own restoration work.
The problem has to be attacked from the water side and not from the bank side.
An observation disputed by the Hunter Catchment Management Trust.
There hasn't been enough study done of that particular aspect to know what contribution speedboats are having to the overall erosion pattern in the Weir pool. There are other aspects like flooding, like the Weir itself, what effect that's having on the river, and cattle access to riverbanks.
Late this afternoon, the Waterways Authority advised Mr Thompson to remove the buoys or risk prosecution.